Join me in prayer. Dear God, in all the fruit salad of worship, all that we celebrate, all that we mourn, give us a moment to think, to pray, to be. Amen. So Mary's story begins in silence. In fact, it begins in a lingering kind of silence. The angel Gabriel comes to the teenage girl Mary. Gabriel tells her things she's too young and too mortal to understand, and then he leaves her alone by herself. And as was her habit, Mary pondered this thing or these things in her heart. Silence. A silence that leads down a path to something we will celebrate, as Kathy said in December, as Silent Night. But long before that night, could I have a little more on here? Long before that night, Mary sings. It happens at her cousin Elizabeth's house. Mary has this cousin who is not like a cousin, really. She's more like an aunt than a cousin, right? Maybe you had an Elizabeth in your life growing up. Maybe you still do. Anyway, Mary may well have been shipped off to Elizabeth's to hide the shame of her own family, thing going on, right? We're not really sure. But even with the generational split between Mary and Elizabeth, or maybe because of it, Elizabeth greets Mary not with shame, but with her own joy. And she too is pregnant in the story. And like Mary, she's pregnant at the wrong time. Because Elizabeth is a bit too old for motherhood, and Mary probably a bit too young. So regardless, we have something as old as history going on here. Women who are there for one another when they need one another the most. And so out of that solidarity, Mary sings. And her song is one of the most uplifting things in the Bible. But maybe not for everybody. My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, for God has regarded the low estate of God's handmaiden. God has scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. God has put down the mighty from their thrones and exalted those of low degree. God has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich God has sent away empty. Quite a song. And so in keeping with what is at the heart of every bit of Jesus' message about wealth and power. So is a targeted tax on billionaires to rebuild America a Christian thing to do? It's at the absolute center of the gospel, but most of those who call themselves Christians who are voting on it don't get that. Well, Mary can't help but wonder why she was chosen. A peasant girl, poor, young, vulnerable, weak. If God was choosing someone to give birth to someone born to stand up to an empire, that's Mary's song, you would think God might have chosen a woman living in a royal palace. I mean, that's what happened in the Hebrew Testament story of Esther, who happened to be a queen, right? However, the choice of Mary, young, poor, vulnerable, communicates something important about the very heart of God that has everything to do with Jesus coming into this world. Mary defines for us how God works in a world in unexpected ways through the lives of the most humble, unlikely people of all. God, this young woman is saying, cares deeply and passionately about all people and how they live, the conditions in which they live. God cares a lot about people who, in this world of plenty, are hungry. That being a given, it's a mistake, I think, to glamorize the poor or demonize the rich. Jesus, remember, did not do that. Because, it was Jesus, not Karl Marx, who said, how hard it will be for the wealthy to enter the kingdom of heaven. But Jesus also had wealthy friends, Joseph of Arimathea, Nicodemus. He was no single-issue social reformer. He did take the side of the underdog time and again, and he went out of his way to be with the poor and the outcast and to identify with them. But what he wanted and wants from every man and woman is a personal spiritual revolution, right? A reordering of our values and commitments regardless of how much money we have or don't have. We are, all of us, dependent on one another, he was telling us. But in this libertarian era, not everyone knows this. Many are doing their best to ignore this. That's why so many are dying needlessly, right, of COVID-19. Why the world is dragging its collective feet in addressing the climate catastrophe. But in the Bible, the poor know they are poor. In the Bible, the poor know how dependent they are on others, how ultimately vulnerable they and we all are, in fact. In the Bible, the poor seem to understand that the only thing of real value in life are gifts that we all share together. Not what we earn or become, but what we are given. Jesus saw that the poor are uniquely positioned to understand that everything, even our next breath of healthy air, is a gift. They know that what matters most is beauty and friendship and people who love you. Which is why when you see pictures of children in what we used to call third world countries, they are often, if not always, smiling. They know the score, but they smile anyway. But a lot of people throw such simplicity and gratitude, under the bus. They complain life is hard and choose to steel themselves against it in their own cocoons instead of embracing our communal inherent vulnerability. Probably the most quoted Presbyterian author is Frederick Buechner. Here's what he had to say about his family's reaction to his father's suicide when he was a young boy. To soften the blow, his mother chose to move the family to Bermuda, a place, with sun and water, a place where they could maybe heal. Her imperious mother-in-law disapproved about this strenuously. You should stay and face reality, she said. Buechner wrote this in his memoir. In terms of what was humanly best, this comment was perhaps the soundest advice she could have given us. That we should stay and through sheer will put our lives back together by becoming as strong as she was herself. But when it comes to putting broken lives back together, when it comes in religious terms to saving souls, the human best tends to be at odds with the holy best. To do for yourself the best that you have it in you to do, to grit your teeth and clench your fists in order to survive the world at its harshest and worst, is by that very act to be unable to let something be done for you and in you that is more wonderful still. The trouble with steeling yourself against the harshness of reality is that the same steel that secures your life against being destroyed secures your life also against being opened up and transformed by the holy power of that life itself, the holy power that life itself comes from. You can survive on your own. You can grow strong on your own. You can prevail on your own, but you cannot become human on your own. Surely that is why, in Jesus' sad joke, the rich man has a hard time getting into paradise as that camel through a needle's eye. Because with his credit card in his pocket. The rich man is so effective at getting for himself everything he needs that he does not see that what he needs more than anything else in the world can be had only as a gift. He does not see that the one thing a clenched fist cannot do is accept, even from a loving God, a helping hand. Boy, if there's one message I'd like to get to the world, that's it. In this libertarian, every man stands on his own feet in his own bubble, world and country we're about today. Mary's Magnificat teaches a simple truth. You cannot receive a gift unless you have a place for it. You cannot learn anything if you think you know it all. You can't enjoy beauty unless there is a place in you that yearns for it. You can't receive love unless you know there is a place in you that's empty and needs love to fill it. As Reverend John Buchanan has said, you can't be lifted up unless you know you are poor. I think that's something of what Mary had in mind when she said, "My soul magnifies the Lord. The mighty one has done great things. He has scattered the proud, brought down the powerful. God has lifted up the lowly and filled the hungry with good things." Now, after that diatribe, I want to say a word about music, since it is the means that Mary uses to bring hope to the poor. You know, the Magnificat is a song. And singing, used to be a very American thing. And what I'm saying is that everyone used to be encouraged to sing. But something happened in the last century to change that. You may not even realize this has happened. We are, though, so starstruck these days that most of us are too intimidated by fame and talent to sing out loud ourselves, right? We've forgotten that once upon a time it was acceptable for everybody to sing in public. There were glee clubs everywhere. Well, the tradition of common singing is not dead everywhere. In Ireland, you been to Ireland lately? Even today, you go into any rural pub and sit with the locals, and at some point, they'll let you have a pint or two first. They'll ask you to sing. It's expected. They sing their song, you sing yours. I will never forget the day 42 years ago I went to Golden Gate Park in San Francisco and heard Luciano Pavarotti sing for nothing. I couldn't see him. The crowd was hundreds of thousands of people. But that voice and that moment and that place was just like a miracle. What is your song? Who is your singer? Often that changes over time as we change. I remember a particularly lonely period of my life back in the 1970s when I lived in a tiny town with no one my age there. And I couldn't get enough of listening to the melancholy songs of Frank Sinatra. I'm not making that up. It doesn't even have to be a great singer if the song is right, like Louis Armstrong singing "What a Wonderful World." There's just something so healing in that song, and he knocked it off in an afternoon along with other songs and never thought it'd even be released. Nancy Burke testifies to this reality. Here's what she says. Every week for 2 winters and 2 summers, as I drove to and from the cancer clinic for treatments, I played Patti LaBelle's music over and over. When I was frightened and thought I couldn't make one more trip, I played those songs to get me there. Afterward, when I was tired and thought I couldn't make the drive home, I played them again. And my spirits never failed to recover, and the miles just flew by. I found such courage and hope in her passionate music. In the midst of the darkest time in my life, that voice made me feel grateful to be alive. There's a song for everyone, she says. one incalculable mix of melody and magic that so neatly wraps the heart that we are lifted out of the here and now, and something in us heals. In a letter written during what we now call the Italian Renaissance, Marsilio Ficino wrote the following to a friend. Do not be surprised, Francesco, that we combine medicine and music with the study of theology. Since you are dedicated to philosophy, you must remember that within us, nature has bonded body and spirit with the soul. The body is indeed healed by the remedies of medicine, but spirit is tempered and nourished by the airy smells, by sounds, and by song. To the Egyptian priests, medicine, music, and the mysteries were one and the same study. Medicine, music, mystery. Singing just does the most amazing things to the human spirit. It's powerful. Sometimes it's downright dangerous, too. One December, late in the 1980s, near the end of its rule, the white government in Pretoria, South Africa, banned the lighting of candles and the singing of Christmas carols in the township of Soweto. This is during apartheid, right? Can you believe it? When asked why by a member of the press, the government spokesman said, well, you know how emotional black women are. Christmas carols have an emotional effect upon them. Geez, you'll let a poor Jewish peasant girl like Mary or a black mother in Soweto sing, you don't know where it might lead, right? Well, they were right? They proved the moral bankruptcy of their rule for all time by saying it. But music has power. They were scared of it, and rightly so. In 1961, Bob Dylan sang "The Times They Are A-Changing," and they were, more than any of us had any idea. Who can calculate the power of solidarity created in that decade by the singing of one song, "We Shall Overcome"? Nothing did more than that song to change the country in ways we're still recovering from and fighting about. You know, it has often been noted that when a child is starving, utterly emaciated and near to death, he or she no longer cries. Tears dry up, the child becomes silent. The hunger becomes so deep it moves beyond pain, beyond feeling, to utter empty silence. And it's for those people that Mary sings her remarkable song. My soul magnifies the Lord. God has put down the mighty from their thrones and exalted those of the lowest degree. Mary sings for Elizabeth, who had cried herself to sleep countless nights in her youth, crying for a baby she must have believed never would come. In that way, Mary sings for the black women of Soweto who were forbidden to respond to the call of their own hearts at Christmas. She sings for mothers all over the world who worry about their yet-to-be vaccinated children. For all of us who care about these things, Mary sings her song. Someone said of Mary that she is like any cup easily broken. Like all vessels, she is too small for the destiny she has to contain. And so, unable to contain it, she overflows with music. She's like the nation of Israel in exile in Babylon 400 years before Jesus. I spoke of that nation in the first sermon in this series back in September. Remember how they said, by the rivers of Babylon, there our captors required of us songs. Sing us one of the songs of Zion, they taunted. And how can we sing the Lord's song in exile in a foreign land? But they did. They found the words for it. They couldn't sing the old praise songs about God triumphing for them. Those didn't work anymore. But in place of those, they made up a song out of their sadness. And they sang about being forsaken. And the music we call the blues was born. Those are the Psalms. That's where it started. So Mary sings knowing she's going to have to say something to her fiancé about her pregnancy, knowing that there is no way in the world he's going to understand. She sings knowing that for Elizabeth, having a child at 43 years old isn't going to be anything approaching easy. And this birth of John the Baptist will just be the beginning of it all. Despite questionable circumstances and doubtful outcomes, Mary sings because singing is what life is about, right? It's the real reason humans have mouths like we do. And let me admit, we need to sing too. That's been the absolute hardest part of worshiping together, right? That we have not felt safe singing. One last story, but it's the most important one. There is a tribe in East Africa where singing is the single most important thing in life for everyone to do. Everyone to do. In this tribe, when a woman is pregnant, she is encouraged to spend a lot of time, kind of like Mary, reflecting about what is going on inside of her, pondering it. She thinks actively of the life within her. And out of that reflection, she hums to herself a melody, and that melody becomes her child's song. So when the child comes into the world, the women around her and her mother, her Elizabeth, sing that song to aid the birth and to welcome the child into the world. But that's only the beginning. Throughout the child's life, the song is sung at significant times. At the child's coming of age, at the child's wedding, and finally, when that child has grown old, the song is sung at the deathbed by her children and her family and her friends. This is a song for everyone. One incalculable mix of melody and magic that so neatly wraps the heart that we are lifted out of the here and now, and something in us can heal. God, we need that now. Amen.